Welcome to Building the Future, hosted by Kevin Horick. With millions of listeners a month, Building the Future has quickly become one of the fastest rising programs, with a focus on interviewing startups, entrepreneurs, investors, CEOs, and more. The radio and TV show airs in 15 markets across the globe, including Silicon Valley. For full showtimes, past episodes, or to sponsor the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com.
Welcome back to the show. Today we have Barry Dean. He's the co-founder and CEO at LUCI. Barry, welcome to the show.
It's wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. I actually think you guys and what you guys are doing at LUCI is probably the most inspiring company I've ever had on the show in 500 plus episodes. So I'm actually honored to have you on the show. And I think what you guys are doing is amazing. But maybe before we get into that, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
I grew up in Pittsburgh, Kansas, a little town near Joplin, Missouri, if you're Route 66 fans. And
Okay, cool.
so I grew up there in that little town, and they, the company that owned the most Pizza Huts was there, and Bill Russell from the Dodgers came from there. And that's about, that's kind of what we were known for. Those were our big things, really.
Very, very cool. So you went to university. What did you take and why?
Well, I went to Pittsburgh, this little college there called Pittsburgh State University, not the big Pitt State in Pennsylvania, but Pittsburgh
Okay.
State. This college, the mascot is a gorilla, and we're the only one in the country. And when I first went, I studied music, and then somewhere in there, I switched over. My dad convinced me that I should switch to printing management because he said there'll always be somebody printing checks. That was the logic, and so this
Interesting.
was in the 80s, and so after that, years later, I became more interested in futurist things after that prediction. But but I went there and studied some technical things and music and found my way through that program. So then I went into the music business for a little while, and then I left the music business when I was like 21. I'd moved
Wow.
to LA and jumped out and came back, and then I ended up working at an education curriculum company, and they developed what was then called technology education. Some people called it applied physics then, or it's kind of become STEM or STEAM. And so I was involved in that for quite some time with Lego education and
Wow.
helping develop marketing and communication. And then in my 30s, I switched gears and became a songwriter in Nashville, Tennessee. Started making trips to Nashville and ended up becoming a professional songwriter, which saying you're a professional songwriter is a little strange, right? So, but it's
Sure,
true.
but you've worked with some of the biggest names on the planet, correct?
I get to work with wonderful artists and country artists and a few pop artists and it's been a joy to get to do that. But I think, because I came to Nashville later, I was 38 when I finally moved here. Then I think I appreciated it even more, and then when I was younger, you just are you realize what a great gig it is to get to do that. Somebody I know says saying you're a songwriter is like saying you're a Keebler elf. It's just a very rare gig, and you should be glad you get to do it. So,
Sure. No, that's amazing. So, what exactly is Lucy, and how did you come to found it?
well, Lucy itself it's a technology for power wheelchairs. It's an add-on to it. The system fits onto existing power wheelchairs.
Amazing.
It's not its own wheelchair. It works on existing wheelchairs and uses sensors to help it see its environment and prevent it from smashing into walls, dropping off curbs, or tipping over those kinds of things because that's pretty common in the world of wheelchairs. Now, I have a daughter, Katherine, and she just turned 21.
Wow.
And when she was little, she got a power chair, and she was so little, she was maybe 5 years old, and we go, and the chair is very expensive. The MSRP on these things is north of 60,000.
Wow.
I think our current one is like 83,000, and with insurance, there's games with all that. But
Right.
we get the power chair, and she's a little kid, and she hits the button, and takes off going 7 miles an hour down the hallway, and me and the sales guy grab onto the back of it. It's dragging us and goes straight into the wall.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, like a lot of parents, I brought it home and parked it in the garage
Sure.
for a while. But eventually, we let it out of the garage and we began practicing driving, and she learned how to drive it and became a very good driver. And we've had now 3 or 4 power wheelchairs in her lifetime. Now, the interesting thing about that though is I was riding with a friend of mine and a recording artist, and this friend of mine's mother has the same model chair my daughter has.
Okay.
And his mother took the ramp, was driving on a sidewalk and took the ramp just a little early. And where a 2.5 inch drop would have been okay for that particular model of wheelchair, but a 3.5 inch drop wasn't. And it threw her and broke her knee
Oh,
and all kinds of traumatic injuries. Well, I had never really thought about how what the weight these things weigh, 350 pounds, something like that or more.
okay.
And I just hadn't thought through the ability for a thing to harm her. And
Sure.
so I began looking for a solution, and I honestly did not set out to start a company. I was just looking for a solution to a problem that obviously affected my friend's family and now was concerning me about our family. And I start doing research, and I'm turning up these numbers of 175,000 people a year go to ER for wheelchair injuries, and I'm just going, I had no idea this was a thing, how common these tips and falls were. And I'm finding some horror stories,
Sure.
and so I start looking for a solution because I just assumed it existed. I couldn't find it. And so I called my brother. My brother's 14 years younger and a really successful engineer in product design and systems engineering, and especially in controlled areas,
Okay.
gases and things. And so I called him and I said, "Hey, help me find this. I'm doing research and I'm looking for a solution." And he couldn't find it either. And so we went to the main conference that they have for this, called the International Seating Symposium, and
Okay.
again thought we would find it. And we got there, and not only was it not there, nobody was really working on it. It seemed that it was a hard thing to do,
Sure.
and so that's when we began saying, let's just work on this. Let's see if we can come up with a way to mitigate this problem for Catherine. And then when we did, that's when we said, "Wow, we might should consider we could help a lot of people, and this technology could really do other things." And that's when we kind of changed our vision over from just finding a solution to maybe this is an opportunity that we hadn't seen before.
No, that's amazing. So, the technology that you guys have built, let's be honest, there's some of the biggest brands on the planet basically trying to build the same thing, but for cars and other kind of motorized vehicles. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. That's right. Yeah, I mean, certainly. And I do think there are maybe some differences that our particular use case allowed us to have a lens to see the thing a little differently. I
Okay.
think the tendency is to say the goal is autonomy.
Right.
And with wheelchairs, that's not really accurate. The goal is independent mobility. And
Right.
so I want help, or I want I may want some safety systems or some assistance in certain situations, but I, as the user, am in control. And so we're going to deal very heavily with the human, keeping that human in the loop. Where I think the tendency with autonomous vehicles, the larger variety was, hey, we'll just make them completely autonomous from the get
Got you.
go. And so that's a little different. And the other thing that I think was different about our approach was, you know, in dealing with a car, I'm not trying to imply, oh, this is so easy for cars, and I'm not the CTO, but you have rules of the road, you have signs and roadways and mapping, and there's so many things you can bring to bear on that situation to help. But in the user of a wheelchair's world, you're driving in your home down narrow
Right.
hallways, you're going out in your yard, you're on sidewalks, you're in vans, you're going to schools, you're going everywhere, and there aren't posted regulations, and there aren't maps of the insides of these buildings or sidewalks. So you are really operating in an area that is a little different, and it creates other issues. Another example would be, you know, a power wheelchair is an electric wheelchair, so we had to be concerned about power draw
Totally.
and
Yeah.
transferability of people in and out of the chair. So we suddenly, instead of just going, okay, we're going to use very expensive lidar and wrap this thing and put a server rack on here and do those kinds of things, that solution wasn't going to offer the power, the cost, or the performance demands that we were going to need at really high tolerances. And so that led us to kind of going in a different direction, and now that's turning out to be a really good thing.
Interesting. So walk us through the early stages and early prototypes to what Lucy is today and how it fits on to current models of wheelchairs.
Well, it's been quite a journey,
I
and
can
we
imagine.
started a few years ago, and then we announced that we existed a year ago in June. So
Oh,
it's been a little
congrats.
over a year. Thank you. And then we started selling at the end in March of this year. So
Very
so
cool.
it's been just that time as an example is what it took to deal with, distribution and supplier arrangements in this industry. So there were
Right.
lots of elements to it, but the early models, we did early prototypes, and then we pretty quickly came up with an approach towards sensor fusion and how we and processing, and so at that point then we had our beta users that tested it for 40,000 plus hours, and
Wow.
we learned so much from the clinicians. We really early on engaged clinicians and actual users, not just my daughter, but other users in Colorado and here, and their feedback and insight was incredible and still is. And so that was a very different way of approaching it, um, to sort of make sure we're dealing with the things that concern them. But also we had some great advisors who had worked in autonomous vehicle design and precision agriculture, and those kind of experienced intellectual property engineers kind of were able to say, yes, but what do you want to see in the next 20 years? What levels of connectivity? How do you want this to move forward? And so that really helped us a lot, is to start with a longer view of, we call them the 42 stories of things we saw wheelchairs doing if they became the command center for someone's independently mobile life. And so really all of this was about, we were meeting these phenomenal people, and then we were looking at the wheelchair and realizing it was not living up to the potential of the person in the chair.
Sure.
And I feel that way about my daughter. And so at that point, we felt like, okay, let's push that way. Let's begin to try to see if this chair can live up to the potential of the people that are utilizing it. And so it's been a great learning journey. I don't come at it from a technical place. As you know, I'm coming at it from the songwriter, creative, in that space. And my brother is really the technical. This would be a very short story without him. I'd be Dad wants to make a change. Dad wishes. But then when you bring my brother into it, it suddenly became an empowered story of. And there's a great team we have here in Nashville, our corporate group, and then in Colorado we have our engineering and R&D team. So that's been
Very cool.
uh,
That's amazing.
yeah, and it's worked well in the light of all the changes in the last year or so.
Sure. So walk us through. So I order Lucy. How do I how do I set it up and what do I need to do to actually
Mhm.
get it into a current wheelchair?
Well, that's a great question. The Most of the time, people who are getting a wheelchair are getting it in a seating and mobility clinic of some kind. So,
Okay.
so they'll have a clinician or and or ATP that's helping them. And so they'll be ordering their chair, and there's just a number besides the brands of chairs, and there's 4 or 5 main brands of chairs that are made.
Okay.
Um, and besides picking a brand, you would choose, did you want a front wheel or mid wheel or rear wheel drive? And again, if you've never purchased a chair, and most people haven't, there's a lot to this. And the seating
Sure.
is very important, because if the seating is not, and the chair is not set up properly, the measurements of the leg and seating correctly, it can lead to pressure injuries, which can be
Oh, wow.
incredibly a
Never thought of
major
that.
problem. Yeah,
Yeah, that
so
can be huge. Yeah.
it's a huge deal, and especially if you're dealing with these medical wheelchairs. You'll see, you can find little things at the mall or scooters and on Amazon that are just a few $1,000s. But we're now talking about a chair that is medically necessary,
Right.
and it's made to serve a person 3 to 5 years and then be
Okay.
replaced. And it normally involves custom seating, but also custom drive controls. So, we tend to think of joystick drive controls, but there are some who drive it by using pads positioned by their head, or even just the ability to use their eyes, and there's a camera following their eyes to help
Oh,
them drive.
interesting.
So there are some amazing. We found innovation in those alternative drives, and we
Okay.
saw some very good. They're making a good mechanical wheelchair, but in the middle, there wasn't the brain. We couldn't have a hackathon about it because there
Ah,
was nothing really to hack. And so that's where we began focusing our attention, which was to say, we're going to push forward and connect to the rest of the world. So we're going to connect to Alexa and Google Fit and Apple Health and those kinds of things, and allow you as the person living with mobility to choose to share things with certain people. If your battery is low, for
oh,
instance,
interesting.
I want it to be shared with someone. We had a situation with Katherine where she had a surgery in St. Louis, and we live in Nashville, and the chair was parked there for several days. Someone, well, it was her father, forgot to bring the charger,
Ah,
and so the battery dies. So
sure.
and so, oh no, and we got it all sorted out. But her chair now with Lucy, it would uh, it would text us and say, "Hey, the battery's dropped below 20%." It would just manage things. I think kind of the way we all assume it would. But back to your question, how do you order a chair? Normally, you'd go in and a clinician would evaluate you and your ability to drive, what drive method is best, what seating would be best to protect you and your skin, and then what drive model, front wheel or mid wheel or whatever, would serve your needs. And then that would be ordered, and normally insurance or Medicare or Medicaid would need to respond. Well, at the time of the order now, you could just uh, choose Lucy, and Lucy would be a part of that order now. So
Oh,
that
very cool.
so it makes it a lot easier. It can be done after the fact, and we've done a few of those
Okay.
using salespeople in different regions. But most of the things we're seeing are new chairs, and early on, especially at the VA, we've spent a lot of time early on here
Oh,
in the VA, and that's been a great honor to get to do that.
very cool. So I want to cover how some of this stuff works because, like, obviously adding Alexa and Google Assistant and the cloud and um, some of the other features. Do you want to talk about those features? Because it's actually quite fascinating, and it's kind of crazy that it hasn't been on these chairs until you guys put it on these chairs. Is that fair to say?
That's a fair thing to say, and honestly, when we started down the road, we believed it existed. We just hadn't seen it. And then as
Right.
we researched and couldn't find it, we became just fascinated. I mean, my bathroom scale is connected to everything,
Sure. Yep.
and the toaster is telling me things. Everything's telling me something, but that wasn't really going on in this space. And so we really wanted to set out to kind of create and forge new levels of communication between the user of the wheelchair, that driver, and their team and the rest of the world. So, we just in the last few months, we announced a partnership with the Smart Cities Alliance,
Oh, amazing.
and some things we're doing there. And so we've tried to build bridges with the technology so we can connect to those things. And right now, like for instance, with Alexa, for instance, um, a lot of times people will get their chair plugged in, and then you'll be transferred into their bed. And if my daughter gets up in the morning and the chair wasn't plugged in right, or it's not charging, that's going to change your whole day,
Sure.
right? It's a
Yeah,
big deal.
totally.
And so this way she can say, Alexa, ask my Lucy if it's charging. And then it'll give
Amazing.
her a report on all that. And as we go forward, you're going to see us in the next few months and all show um, applying AI to seating and
Oh,
intelligent
interesting.
seating systems where we're bringing data for time and seat, or some people use an air type cushion. Is that pressure at the right? It's supposed to be at a certain pressure, and if it deviates too much, it stops performing the way it's supposed to. Well, we should be able to. That's not impossible to solve, and so tagging of ramps, so certain ramps going into vans or certain situations, uh, it can help you in a more what we would call autonomous, but an automated way. We think Lucy is going to have a real role in mapping accessible routes, especially within public buildings or sidewalks, those kinds of things. So we've kind of worked on a lot of things, and then at a certain point, narrowed down and said, okay, we're going to issue the first, the safety system that goes on the chair, and then does over the air updates. So we're already, I think, on 1.3, and it's
Amazing.
only been, that's really exciting too, to be able to add benefit and feature and fun to the product.
No, that's awesome. So, how does the actual chair with Lucy connect to the internet? Is it through my smartphone? Is it Bluetooth my smartphone? How does that connectivity work?
Currently, um, It's it's gonna connect with Wi-Fi to
Okay.
networks that you've established, and then, it has on board as well, some cell technology. So
Got
it
you.
it can connect when it needs to.
That's
And
awesome.
all the data is anonymized and those kinds of things. So there was a lot of emphasis in security.
That was gonna be one of my questions to you. So, let's dive a little bit deeper into that. So, do you collect data so obviously you can make the product better, but you don't know the customer, but can I opt in to give you more data if I choose to, or how does that work?
You can do that. Yes, that's right. And we do keep it aggregated and anonymized kinds of data, but you have the right to determine how your data will be used, So it's more operating like an operating system on a
Sure.
wheelchair, and it is generating data about the wheelchair, and how many collisions have been avoided, drop-offs have been avoided. And the user has all that data with their My Lucy app, and they're in control of where that's shared. And so we've
Ah,
sort of taken three stances around it. One is that, you know, collision avoidance, all the core features, those exist whether you opt in or out of using the app. It's going to
got
function
you.
either way. And then the second sort of stance we took was that the user controls the use of their personally identified data, and so that lets the driver be in control of whether or not anyone else can see that information, that explicitly has their identity. And then we still do over the air updates even if you don't opt in. We felt, build trust in an area where, again, this is not an area that's been kind of addressed in
Right.
this particular market. So we put out a privacy and security report. We published a 30 some page book on here's how we think safety systems should be tested in this industry. And
Wow.
then we put out a document called Judging Smart that they're actually teaching in a course at Ohio State and at University of Washington, just saying if we're going to say, wheelchairs are smart. How are we judging that? Well, could we apply standards from the automotive world to this? Could we apply standards from this and here? and that's hopefully provoking good discussion and a future roadmap in this industry. But again, these are all topics that had been really kind of left out of the conversation. There was kind of a mechanical, this is my term for it, but it's kind of a mechanical industry. We adjust and move bolts, and we tighten screws, and then we put a cushion on it, and there wasn't a lot of software based development, it didn't seem. And so we're kind of doing something for this industry, which may sound like, gosh, that should already exist, but strangely it didn't in this kind of corner of the medical world.
Sure. No, it's inspiring that you and your brother decided to tackle such a huge problem, right? And the the
Well,
the question though is, how did you get these partnerships with these wheelchair companies? Because it's that's got to be hard to do.
well, it has been, quite a journey. I think I would answer first by saying, we didn't start the project. We didn't set out to start a company. At a certain point, we realized if this was going to happen, it
Right.
would take a company that was very focused and strategic about it to do it. And and then, we kind of came to the realization that maybe this was ours to do. And so we did spend a lot of time developing it, the technology, doing our FDA things and our FCC things, and literally worked with TI on a new millimeter wave radar, and
Oh, wow.
worked with Intel on using cameras in different ways, and we were really grateful for everyone who helped us. But at the core was this incredible team of engineers and some freelance engineers and freelance product designers, and that were working with us for a couple of years in the dark on it. So it was a big it was a big risk, but it also felt like we were seeing something and had the IP to back it up, so that if we were right in our vision of what we were trying to do, that we would be okay. And so that's the decision we made. Now, as far as the manufacturers, I'm happy to say we are working alongside four of the five manufacturers, and I hope the
That's
fifth will
awesome.
join us soon. And so that's been, again, we're such a small company, and then these are such larger companies. That has been its own education, but we've had really good. I would say the first one we worked with was named Permobile, and we chose Permobile because that was the chair my daughter had.
Wow.
And you know, there were lots of people in our little industry going, "Well, why did they choose Permobile, and how did they?" And it was pretty simple. That's the one Katherine was in, and then several of our family friends were in Permobiles, and so that's where we started. And they've been a great partner with us right from the get-go, and that's continuing. That relationship's continuing, and we didn't know what it would be like, but they've been very good to work with, and now we've started working with these other companies, Quickie, Sunrise, and so I think we'll just keep doing that. And um, it is a difficult industry because of, you're still dealing with CMS coding situations,
Right.
and so that takes time. And again, a lot of our approach has been to go, okay, what is the mountain that is to be climbed here? Let's go see if we can reach out to people that are successful in this or are experts at it, and let's go learn. And so we tend to see ourselves as people that are pretty aggressive about seeking people out and learning things and studying the best practices, and then innovating and applying them. And so it has been. That sounds maybe a little too simple, but that has been how we've approached it, and we've had some great marketing partners, and I think that helped too. I have to say, I can't our little company can't take credit for all of that. I mean, all of a sudden, we were getting notices that we never thought of. When we were in Time or Popular Science or whatever. That was a shock. So all of a sudden, that really helped bring us to the table in a better fashion, I think.
No, that's amazing. And I think too, like some of these companies that you're working with, like Intel, like they're always looking for innovative things as well, right? To be a part of, and especially when, they can really help out with their technology, whatever you're doing, right?
That's right. That's right. And again, because we are looking at issues like autonomy or sensor information and how to process that in a different way, I think that was of interest to them too, because
Sure.
we were doing things in a different way. We were looking at objects from a different lens, and I think that led to some interesting discoveries and made us good partners to work with. I hope it did, and it's been quite a journey. I was trying to think if I got your question answered on how people order it. Did I make sure I answered that?
Yeah, you did.
Okay, great. Yeah.
So the one thing I'm curious about, and you've kind of touched on it a little bit, is some of the features, but I'm curious to know, how do you do the, like, collision avoidance and the the drop off and tip protection type stuff? Because are you using, like, camera sensors for that? Or walk us through some of the actual hardware.
Okay. On the hardware that attaches to the chair, you'll have millimeter wave radar
Okay.
that's giving us a very good picture of things, and then you have several stereo vision cameras that are providing all kinds of information to us. And then you will have also some ultrasonics, and even our ultrasonics have been custom made and hot wired a little bit, um, so that they perform better in LEED certified buildings. And it's just so noisy, the ultrasonic
Right.
world, and so the ultrasonic sensor works with the other two as kind of a fail-safe or a checker. And then those three sensor feeds are fused, and we use ARM processing. And then we have on board several IMUs, and so it's all in kind of if you could picture it, it's like a frame, a steel frame with these modular hardware pieces. So it bolts directly to the chair using existing screws in the power chair, kind of between the seat and the wheels is where we
Okay.
always are positioned there. And so different models of and brands of wheelchairs might use a different frame, but they're using different modular pieces that we've designed and you know tested at IP54 and the different standards to make sure it's collision ready and waterproof and those kinds of things. And then up on the joystick, there's a little dashboard area thing that we attach, and then there's a hub on the back that's protected from water and things. But it really is a USB hub, so that we can begin to add other things and publish an API, so that research can be done. In fact, right now, University of Washington has a team in Denver working with our team. There's certain kinds of data they need from chairs for pediatric research. And
Oh,
so,
interesting.
it's coming up on Thanksgiving, so we have a few days where we um, just allowed our team to help, so we can make good things happen in that regard. So anyway, that frame attaches. It has that complement of hardware on it, and then there's a little something up by the joystick we call the dashboard. There's something on the foot plates. We call it the Scout. It's the furthest forward uh, sensor,
Okay.
and then that's it. So it installs. It takes about 45 minutes, and then the app allows you to set certain preferences or boundaries. If a person had a ventilator on the back of their chair, they may need a little extra space there. But generally, if you
Uh,
think of the top-down footprint of the wheelchair, we're trying to give a 360-degree view. And um, and then the other thing that we're doing as far as drive control that's interesting, is we test the user's reaction time,
oh,
and this
fascinating.
has not been done before in this space. And so instead of trying to set torque settings to a motor, or choose, like your old toasters, choose how do you want your toast? You want a 1 or a 7? Well, I don't even know what that means. Um, we now are saying, let's just measure the reaction time of this person so that we can have our software do the calculations to keep the
Ah,
world within their reach, comfortably within their reach. So if they're driving in an open space and they have a slow reaction time, they'll be able to just go as fast as they need to go. But if they're in a confined enclosure and they need a little extra time, it'll help slow so they can react to it, so they can still be in control of their experience. And so it's a pretty neat deal.
yeah, fascinating. That's really cool.
Thanks.
So you touched on what's shown to the person on the dashboard. Is it kind of constantly updating, or what type of data or visuals are they getting on that dashboard?
It's very simple. You know, and in the future, down the road, we may integrate with joystick makers or come up with a different, more evolved dashboard.
Okay.
But originally we chose a simple one. It's telling them each user is given a key for
Okay.
their wheelchair now, and the key is a security item for data. So if they don't want their data identified,
Right.
um, then they can keep that key away from it. But if the key is there, or if they went to another chair with Lucy on it and put their key on it, the settings would go to their settings and the
That's
data would
cool.
follow, right?
That's
And
amazing.
yeah, that's never happened in this industry. I know it happens in others, but and so they have the key, and so it shows is the key present, and then the next light is telling them if they're connected to Wi-Fi, if they're connected to cell, and then probably the two things that are most important there are there is a light that shows if a sensor is blocked in some way. You can
Ah,
imagine if my daughter was wearing a dress and it fell in front of one of the
sure.
sensors, then it would change, from green to yellow or green to red. So she would know there was something blocking the way. And then there's an override button, and again, this allows a person to say, I know it's telling me not to drive forward, or no, it's saying there'll be a collision, but I don't. This is what I want to do.
Right.
They still have the opportunity for that. Or there's a port there if they're using an alternative drive, where there's switches. They're called switches. They can switch control to override. So the user is always the final authority. um, when and that seemed very important in all of our design discussions with users, and so that's what's on that dashboard. It's pretty simple right now, and now the app itself is is it's one of those things that we're learning about. It's gaining complexity. If you can imagine, if
Sure.
we're
Yep.
if we're adding we're tracking collision avoided, and we're tracking all these different things, then we're also adding smart seating as we move forward. And then, we have also now this visualizer. If you think of typical automotive, that view that you get that shows you top down of your vehicle and
Yep.
lets you know how far you are from things. Well, we're getting ready to announce we'll have that in our app,
That's
so
amazing.
that you could have that if you wanted it while you were driving. You could imagine, my daughter's fine, and she's not necessarily. I talk about her because that's a person I'm uh, closely related to.
Right.
I'm not in a chair, so I don't know the experience, but I know what it is to love and care about someone who is having that experience and be part of the caregiving team. But, her spine is fused, with over 2 dozen screws, so she can't crank around and look. So backing up
Ah,
is a thing. So we thought, well, maybe a visualizer would help. Now, obviously, if she were backing up and something was there, Lucy would stop the chair so
right.
she wouldn't run into her dog or whatever she was doing. But, but we thought, well, maybe a visualizer would be helpful. So now we're starting to get into that area of design where we're about to have a little summit and look at the industrial design side of, how do we make this app the easiest to use.
That's amazing. But Barry, we're kind of coming to the end of the show. So how about we close with mentioning where people can get more information about Lucy and any other links you want to mention?
All right, I would love that. We're at lucy.com. We're spelled different. We're LUCI. Lucy that came to us. Catherine's favorite song is "Lucy in the Sky,"
Oh, very cool. I was
and
going to ask that
so
actually when you mentioned that, but that's cool.
yeah, it was a code name for the cloud development, and then when we were trying to figure out the actual name, one of the creative team said, "Why wouldn't we use Lucy?" And we're like, "Oh." And so we've been really grateful for that. It's been a fun name to get to be a part of, and so we're at lucy.com. We're Lucy Mobility on Instagram and Twitter and all the socials, and so that's probably the easiest way to get a hold of us, and and we're starting to see, a lot of interest from technology outside of the seating and mobility wheelchair space, because with ride technology or industrial robots, or even devices, forklifts that are ZTR and do different things with it. I think our approach is starting to be a unique approach. And I don't know that we understood that when we started, but we sure see it now, that that's going to be a whole new phase of development for the technology. So this will be kind of an exciting part of that, I think.
No, yeah, totally. That's fascinating. Well, Barry, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day, man.
Man, thank you for letting me be a part of this. This is an honor to get to be on here. Thank you so much for your kind words too.
Oh, no, thank you, man. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.
All right, take care.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for listening. Please visit our website at buildingthefutureshow.com to join the free community, sign up for our newsletter, or to sponsor the show. The music is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.